Everyone, here we are. Give me just a second. I got focus in, and I am here with Blake, who is one of the newest guys that's going to jump in and give us some content. So, we're going to be doing the NFL draft, the top 10 teams, what they need, who they should be looking at in the draft, and honestly, just talking about them. So, please feel free to jump in if you have questions and want to talk about someone. So, first up, we have the Tennessee Titans. Number one need, they have quarterback. All right. So, Blake, we can jump in, talk about this what you want. It says quarterback. Obviously, they have Will Levis. Is there someone that you really like in the draft, or do you think they should row with Will Levis?
I think you could give Will a chance, but I think quarterback is definitely a need to address just to have some competition in there as well. But obviously, and the guy that everybody's talking about is Cam Ward, who is just, I think he's shown some pretty tremendous athleticism. He's got pretty good being able to throw the deep ball. He's
Yeah, I really like him. He kind of reminds me of Bo Nix, like with the accuracy and everything like that. I think going back did him another just really good solid. I think the big thing with quarterbacks in this class is everything I've read. Basically, people said that none of the quarterbacks in this class would have jumped the top quarterbacks in last year's.
Yes.
So that's just kind of hard, when you have Sanders, when you have Ward and stuff. And so you have someone like Will Levis, and I think that's where you're looking at it. You're like looking at your grade board and you're like, do I put them above Will Levis? And they do have some tools. They have Calvin Ridley. They have Tajay Spears. They have your Cowboys guy.
They got Tony Pollard right there running the backfield as well. But I think a quarterback it's a big thing to address, especially with a team. I think you really need the help. Will is, he's the pressure he hasn't been able to handle very well. It's been tough for him. And Cam Ward is a guy that just comes in and brings a fresh energy. Proved himself both at Washington State and then going again at Miami this last year with a high-powered offense.
I think the thing is the old saying, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have basically a team. Number two, wide receiver. I think that if I'm really someone, like if I have an okay quarterback, and excuse me just a second, now just give you a little bit more, but if I have an okay quarterback like Will Levis, who I might be riding until next year, where obviously the crop looks a lot better. You have the wide receiver out of Arizona. Obviously, you have Colorado. This draft is so deep at wide receiver and running back. I almost wonder if you just, punt this year at quarterback and you take those skill positions to kind of help set up, what you have in the future.
Yeah, and this opens up. I know a lot of people talk about looking at this year's draft, but going into next year, I know there's some conversation around, is it better for teams that need a quarterback this year to potentially delay that and look to the future of maybe Arch Manning coming in next year? Like, that is certainly a conversation. It's interesting, but I think...
Does it hurt your soul as a OU guy? So give you a little background. Blake is a graduate from the University of Oklahoma. Does it hurt you to say Arch Manning?
Yeah, it does. It's
okay.
It's whatever. It's fine. We'll
is it like touching this hot stove?
Yeah, well, you know what? I can't ignore, I guess, what we've seen so far.
Exactly.
We'll but anyway.
Talent is talent.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And the name certainly brings a certain pedigree to him as well. So that'll be to decide. But I still think overall the Titans, I think a quarterback this year is a good move for them. Particularly, I think Cam Ward seems like the right fit. That provides also another element, I think, in the running game as well, a little bit, which I think they could use a little more help on. Brings a certain amount of speed that I don't think Will Levis brings.
Yeah, I think whenever you start talking Shador, the problem is you got to make sure you have the right offense coordinator. Think how Roman for the Ravens was the offense he originally built for Lamar, which helped him kind of along. And that's just really important. Like when you're bringing these young these passers, you need to make sure you're marrying the right offense with them and things like that. We can go ahead and move on to the Cleveland Browns, who I think is actually a little bit more of an interesting team just because of the fact that you have Myles Garrett talking about he wants to leave. They clearly need a quarterback, which I want to quickly talk about that because as people that follow our channel, half of DGO is Browns fans. And I think they made the right decision when they decided to bench. And I do apologize. We've been drinking, talking about doing stuff. The number one pick that they had, Winston, bench him because the problem is Winston was going to win some games for them, and they didn't want to be like the Giants, who we're going to talk about at number 3, accidentally win a game and end up with not a top pick. Like when you're tanking and stuff, that's the best thing to do. And honestly, weirdly, I think in the off season, the injury, that occurred to the quarterback is one of the best things that could have happened, because to me, he is washed up.
And it's interesting. The whole quarterback situation here is there's so much drama behind the quarterback room with all the things going on with Sean Watson,
exactly.
With the injury, with the scandal, with all these other things, and then you have Jameis Winston, who is certainly a polarizing figure. I think almost at this point, for the Browns, you want to look at a fresh start at quarterback, and you say, okay, let's just reset the table, and you have a guy in Shedeur Sanders who I think has proven himself. I think it'll be interesting to see what his maturation level looks like, getting adapted to not only jumping to the NFL, but seeing how he operates without being under the tutelage of his dad, which he's been under almost his entire career. So
exactly.
I think that's a unique element that I'm like.
I mean, from high school, he had his own. Exactly. Yeah.
It's been, so that'll be an interesting, but I think.
Because how do you handle all of a sudden having a different coaching voice? Like when you've had one voice your whole life and you're used to that. And as I say, a lot of the newer players do not like, if it's a rougher coach and stuff like that. And you just don't know exactly how it's going to be with a different coach, especially when your whole life you've only had your dad. I will say, I personally think that Miles, I don't think they trade him just simply from the fact that I think he just wants to know what the game plan is. And I think by them benching Winston, it kind of shows that they are looking to the future. But at his age, he's either 20 or 29, he is looking at, man, my window is closing, and if you're someone where your window is closing, it just becomes hard, because how can you even look 3 years from now? Because that then puts you at 32, 33, which is definitely the end of your career at the NFL. So they are kind of in a hard spot, but I definitely think that they try to convince him so that way they can focus on quarterback, offensive tackle that you see, the wide receiver. Honestly, I think they're pretty good at wide receiver. Judy showed that if he has a decent quarterback, he's okay. Same thing with Tillman. Tillman had pop games. And then obviously Njoku, their tight end, he definitely can be someone that does pretty well. He will have his peaks and stuff like that, but I think they're okay. I think honestly, their biggest thing is with all quarterbacks, you want a quarterback in an offensive line. Like there's nothing worse than you can do than have a good quarterback in an O-line, which, look at the Bears last year with Caleb.
Yeah. And knowing the Browns' history with quarterback, I don't know if this is an opportunity where this is kind of the first shocker of the draft. You get to the second pick, and I know another, depending on what happens with Myles Garrett, do they need another edge rusher? Is this the first shock where maybe Abdul Carter comes into Abdul Carter comes to the conversation, because he is very much a not only just because he came from Penn State, but he is very much a Micah Parsons clone. It's like, okay, do they, given the history of quarterbacks with the Cleveland Browns and such a high pick, is this a part where maybe it's like, well, maybe they throw everybody for a curve and they're like, oh, we want to go with an edge rusher to replace Myles, depending on what happens there.
I mean, you're not wrong, simply for the fact that I know the Browns, with the people on that I know that love them, they would love for Joe Flacco to come back. So let's say you go that route. Let's say you somehow convince Myles and you still go that route. All of a sudden, you're a team that just has a stud defense, and maybe you go a year or two with Flacco and you draft someone next year and stuff like that. But that's always the problem that you have. Right now, you have the number 2 pick, and what happens if next year you do win a few games and stuff like that? Then you're no longer going to get Arch Manning. You're no longer going to get some of those guys that are considered the premier picks next year. And that's always the downside of winning a few games in the NFL. And so I think they really are at a crossroads. And it's just one of those things that's tough. It just really is tough what to do. Moving on, we have the New York Football Giants. I don't see any way they don't do quarterback. I mean, you have Malik Neighbors. You have a running back that they had that they got in the 5th or 6th round. That's pretty decent. I think honestly, and you have the coach and general manager who both are playing for their lives. Like if they do not win this year, then they're going to be out. So it's one of those things where I think the Giants 100% go quarterback.
And I can see that, but I've heard a lot, once again, to bring up his name, I've seen a lot of noise around Arch, and one of those, I think a big room for improvement for them also is, I don't think it's listed, but I think an offensive line. Well,
Yeah.
it's I think offensive line to kind of bolster that, and because you still have Drew Lock who came in and played. Okay, if he brings a certain swagger and he was able to win you a couple games, but is this one where you kind of
So Drew Lock is Minshew, he's Flacco, he's all those where he can throw the ball. It's just his decision making.
Yes.
And that's the thing that ultimately, really cuts those backup people from the ones that are, the top 20 that start, because there's at any given time 20 real starters. Is you have a lot of people that can throw, and to me, that's what it is with Lock. But the problem is if you go down that road, you have a coach and general manager who know they're not going to have next year.
And they might already not have next year. I mean, I think the only saving grace for Brian Dable was he won Coach of the Year, and I'm like, this last year. I mean, now you have promise, and maybe that is QB is the way you need to go, because you have a very talented receiver in Malik Neighbors. I mean, he is just a superstar. In 1
Malik
year.
Neighbors.
If you compare him with a guy that knows how to sling the ball for him, and whether that be a young guy or a veteran, I've heard some noise about potentially maybe if Matthew Stafford is no longer wanted in LA. Do you take the veteran approach for this year to see if it works out, leading you into next year if you need to get a young quarterback, that you have that option?
I mean, but here's the thing, we can quick talk into that. So Stafford, they say, it's kind of the young team, and they're not liking, the big city because of Detroit. New York City. I mean, I get it. He's from right here in Dallas and stuff.
Yep.
You really think he's gonna like New York City? I mean, his wife, who is doing all the talking for him, I really don't see Stafford in New York City because of the fact. I mean, again, Neighbors is a town, but he has Puka. I mean, so it's he has Puka. He has a better coach. He has Kyron at run. If I'm him, I'm thinking legacy. That's not a team. I'm not to me. If we're talking about crazy trades, the team above the Browns fits their Midwest culture and stuff like that. I mean, that would, and again, to Myles Garrett, who we are talking about, maybe that, because then Myles, if you tell Myles we have Stafford, that fits the timeline.
It does.
That fits with Jerry Jeudy and stuff like that, and I think I even heard that on the radio a day or two ago, but they're like, the number 2 pick is just so expensive for Stafford at this point.
It is. I would agree. Yep.
So, I mean, the Giants, I just don't know exactly the direction, other than I just can't see the staff wanting to punt. Mara has shown that he has a little more patience than others. But again, it's just one of those things where maybe you're talking to him, if you're a general manager and Dabo, what you said, and you go, look, we're going to take Cam, we're going to take Sador, and go, but if we take him, we need at least 2 years.
But the Giants are they're in a unique position this year, because given losing Saquon Barkley and seeing him succeed 1 year out, and knowing that Brian Dable is probably on the hot seat this season. Whatever they decide to do with this pick, it has to. If they're going to be swinging for the fences, it has to work out for them, because otherwise there could be some big changes coming to New York next year.
Exactly. Now we'll talk about the team that I'm super bullish on, especially depending on what they can do and what Vrabel did with the Titans. I mean, because they have Ramondre, they have their quarterback who looked great. We are talking the New England Patriots. All right, it's got offense tackle, which is clearly important, but I think when we're talking about that quarterback and everything like that, we got to go to number 2, wide receiver. Yeah. I mean, they need an alpha wide receiver. They need someone that is the go-to guy.
Yeah, and wide receiver for them has been, up and down. They've made some questionable draft picks there, but wide receiver has got to be the immediate need for them. I mean, to give a guy,
Belichick didn't know how to draft a wide receiver. No, I mean, he tried and tried.
And Drake May has proven that he can be the guy going forward.
Exactly.
And I think it's important to also know that Vrabel is.
He won with Tannehill.
And Vrabel is a guy that fits perfectly in New England, as a player, being a previous player there and being under Belichick's tutelage, and he is a guy that fits the culture. And so,
look, he knows how to park the car there, man. He knows that franchise. He knows what Boston wants.
And so I think he knows, going into this draft, he knows what the team needs to address, and getting that clear wide receiver one is probably got to be the ultimate goal for you got to give Drake May a guy that give him his go-to guy that he can work with throughout the season.
So with your, I know you did some, who do you have as the number 1 wide receiver? I personally love, I'm going to butcher last name. We'll just go starts with T out of Arizona State. I love his size. I love his combination. I love how he helped dominate in the Big 12. I'm taking him all day over Hunter at Colorado, who has yet to focus on one of his craft. And I will say this. Hunter scares me because we've seen players like Howard. We've seen players before that have been this dual, and they kind of struggle in the NFL until they settle on one side of the ball or other. So for that reason, I'm taking the guy out of Arizona State.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, speaking of Travis Hunter, I think it seems that now that knowing that going to the combine, he'll be working out as cornerback. If that's the route that they decide to go, and that's where he wants to pursue that position, which I think, in my opinion, is the better route for him to go. I think that's the way to go. I think, a couple other names, Tez Johnson from Oregon proved that he can be kind of an every down receiver. And then the other guy, Luther Burden from Mizzou as well, I think could be a guy that could also be, but I think Tatario McMillan is probably the number one. Even
there we go. Thank you. I was like, I'm not even going to try and say the name.
I know Arizona didn't. I know they didn't have a year that they were hoping, but I mean, he has the size, he has the length, he has the speed, and I think if you're going to go receiver, that is got to be the guy that they got to go after.
Well, and it's one of those. One of my friends of the show, Rebecca, who she does fantastic. She's a big believer of what do your eyes tell you. When I see him, I see a stud wide receiver. What do your eyes tell you? And you watch him, and your eyes tell you that he can play at the NFL level. Where, again, Hunter is electric and stuff like that. I can see him being a little bit more like Dion. I mean, who coached him? And that was probably half the appeal is Dion's like, I was a badass corner. But I did have some plays and stuff like that where I could be a wide receiver and stuff like that. The problem is the NFL and just leagues, all of them so far, they're studying. Everything's gone so better year after year because of the internet, things like that. Just the way they track everything, it's just so hard to do one or the other. Like you have to commit to a craft. I mean, being here in Texas, like they tell kids a lot of times in the 8th grade, you have to pick one sport. Yeah. So we can move on if you'd like to Jacksonville. All right. So we're on to Jacksonville Jaguars. A lot of people, and we have it here at number 5, quarterback. Trevor Lawrence signed, I don't know if it's a year or two ago. I think personally, like I said, I think there's 20 at any given time, 20 quarterbacks that are NFL quarterbacks. Trevor Lawrence is an NFL quarterback. He's shown whenever he has, the time and everything like that. To me, if Dak Prescott is an NFL quarterback, Trevor Lawrence is an NFL quarterback. It's just a matter of giving him the right system and everything like that. So because of that, I would focus on what they have the first 3, which is the defense. What are your thoughts?
I could see that, but I think knowing Liam Cohen, I think it depends on whatever conversations happen inside, knowing that he's an offensive guy. I think that he can I think that, Liam Cohen might want to go offense this time to give them kind of a
because he is an offensive guy.
He is, and to kind of give them a star receiver, somebody they can operate under. But I think defense is probably a position they need to address. That's.
So I'll throw out someone very interesting because fantasy football and stuff like that, and a lot of it. Travis Etienne. I think this is a make or break.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and and I know Trevor is in here as well. I don't know where he stacks up in there. He's probably not close up to the I
want to say he has a year or 2 left.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Before it's like they can get out from his contract. And that's always one of the biggest things is contracts.
But then you got to, So, but I think, honestly, there are a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball. I think that would help him. But it depends on Liam Cohen's philosophy coming in, which that hire to me is kind of unproven. I'm not so sure that they have, I don't know that they have their guy, but, we will. He did incredible things with the Bucs, working under Baker. I don't know, Baker will miss him immensely. I think, working with him both in LA and also now in Tampa.
So here's an interesting thing that I read while I was prepping for this is they're talking about Cohen bringing in Godwin to kind of be the number 2 like he was with the Bucs. I think that would be very interesting if you had Brian Thomas Jr., who I think is very much like Evans, and I just love him, honestly. Cards collecting, which we'll talk about later, that is someone who I loved, and I think if we brought in someone like Cohen, man, that's a match made in heaven, especially if Etienne can do what he did, before this past season.
But it'll be a big, regardless of the draft. I mean, Trevor's, I mean, he's gone through his ups and downs, but I think going back, I think you were right. He's proven to be an NFL quarterback. If you give him the right talent to work with, and you give him some help on the defensive side of the ball, so maybe they don't always have to have such high scoring affairs in order to win football games. You give him a defense. Sometimes the best offense is a good defense. So,
well, and I'm blanking on who was it they upset? I mean, they took the Chiefs to the brink in that one playoff game. I mean, they were winning that game, weren't they, at halftime or something? I mean, it was, right there. And I mean, it's one of those things where I think the Jaguars are one of those teams where if you hired the right coach and everything like that, they can pop right back into playoff contention. All right, let's move on. We have the Raiders. I don't even know what to say other than you have Brock Bowers. I like Brock Bowers. Unlike, and I'll kind of talk about this. So if you are someone that follows us when we're in fantasy season, there's people I hate on, and I am a Kyle Pitts hater. You have heard it over and over. I do not like Kyle Pitts because he did well with Matt Ryan and no one else. And it's one of those things where Bowers did it without a quarterback. So because of that, that makes me a believer when you do it without a quarterback. So you have the Las Vegas Raiders at number 1. I mean, I don't know if anyone falls to them because quarterback needing teams. I don't know. Anyways, what are your thoughts on the Raiders? I'm just kind of curious.
They have an interesting situation, and quarterback is going to be tough for them because it is a need. But I would be shocked to think by this point, if they didn't trade up, that either the guys that they probably want, which are either Shador or Cam Ward, are going to be available. So those are the guys that they're going to want to go after. So maybe their approach would be better getting a veteran and free. I know they've done that with Garner and other position. I think they had Desmond Ridder playing for them this year, and that did not pan out for them. So I think. This might be a potential landing spot for Travis Hunter. If you need a cornerback at this point, you switch the defense and you go a veteran approach with the quarterback. That might be the better play for them.
So, just because of what we saw last year with Penix and Bo and with COVID and you having these quarterbacks and players that played for 6, 7, 8, I mean, you had 25-year-olds getting drafted. I read one article that was very interesting because obviously you're kind of curious what will happen based on how well he tests and stuff like that. But a name that I've only saw in the 3rd round, but they're talking about he could be Bo Nix, who went from 3rd round to the 1st round. Obviously, it's another OU guy that ended up in Oklahoma. Gabriel.
Dylan Gabriel,
yes.
Yeah, of course, yeah. You got a guy that I'm very high on. Dylan Gabriel is an OU guy, but even in general, I mean, Dylan brings something unique because he has ample experience that a lot of these other quarterbacks won't have. He's been in college for so long. It'll be an adjustment period for him, I think, getting up to the next level. But you're bringing in a guy.
But people said the same thing about Bo Nix. Right. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
The comps have been.
And now you have a guy that has the most experience out of any.
It's been 20 years in college.
Seriously. He just refused to leave. So yeah. But you got a couple other guys. If you want to go quarterback, obviously Jackson Dart is up there on the board. I think Jackson Dart is probably an
out of Mississippi State.
Ole Miss.
Ole Miss. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, but then you also have Quinn Ewers, obviously out of Texas, who, my personal biases aside, he showed up when he needed to, but there were some questions about, coming in the games, and obviously later in the season, the Longhorns, all the Longhorn fans were so ready to get him out of there. They wanted Arch so bad.
I'll tell you, we can even jump into that for a second. So I was kind of shocked that Ewers didn't go to another college because there's a rumor about $6 million from someone. Even the way the NIL is, and I'm all for it, pay the people who have earned it. But, you don't have guarantees in the NFL. The draft bust is so high, especially because it's questionable whether or not he'll even be a 1st-round pick. So why? I'm just shocked he didn't go somewhere else and pocket $3-4 million before he goes on. Me as a person, I'm going and banking more money. It's sort of like Livy Dunn. People were kind of, bless you, Claudius. It's sort of like Livy Dunn. People were questioning, will she come back or not or whatever. She saw what happened to the Cavaliers, the twins from Miami.
The Cavalier twins.
Yes. They stopped for a year. They fell off the planet, and they're like, oh my gosh, I lost the spotlight, and they went back to Miami this year. They've recouped some of the money, but not quite where they were at their pick because they're right there with Livy. And so that's where I'm kind of shocked that Ewers didn't just take the money.
No, and NIL has presented a new opportunity for these players, and I was also kind of shocked that Quinn didn't take the opportunity. Particularly, believe the offer was somewhere at a Big Ten school, so I think it was or yeah, I mean, I
I
think.
read that it might have even been SMU because they lost the number one quarterback.
Yeah, that's right.
And like SMU's been right there. I mean, hell, they won the ACC.
They did, but after I think part of Quinn's probably mentality after all of it too was after he left Ohio State. I mean, he's from the state of Texas. He went to the University of Texas. He played at South Lake Carolina. I think for him it was like, this is where I want to cement my legacy here at the University of Texas, and I don't want to. It wasn't necessarily tarnishing that, but him going anywhere, I think maybe it was a more personal decision on his part that he didn't want to be associated with anybody else. I think he already made the jump once.
I mean, I just think you have such a limited window that you can make money, and the NIL is guaranteed money. I am not passing, but again, that's just me.
But the Raiders have, an interesting situation. I believe Max Crosby, I don't know what his situation looks like moving forward too. I don't know if he wants to stick around anymore. So you're getting hurt there. But I think, going back, I think this could be a potential landing spot for Travis Hunter. He's in a big market city, a big market team.
I would agree.
In Vegas. I think this could be a good landing spot for him if that's where they want to go.
I'd agree. And like I said, they have Brock Bowers.
They do.
So, all right, moving on to the hot mess that is the New York Jets. I mean, they've moved on from Aaron Rodgers. Again, when you win a couple of games like they did at the end, it just makes it like, I'll tell you my philosophy as a fan, and I always love when people are like, no, I always want my team to win. I'm the exact opposite. When I know my team's not going to make the playoffs, I want you to lose. I don't want token wins. I want the best draft pick because that helps my team the best. And the Jets at 7 are in that limbo. And, you do have a great wide receiver in Garrett Wilson. You have Breece Hall. You have all these offensive players, so it makes you think, hey, maybe I can get a lower tier of quarterback. But their O-line was trash. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, that was his biggest thing, is he had no time and stuff like that. I see cornerback because Sauce did take a step back, and I'm blanking on the other cornerback, but I know he's a free agent. But it's one of those things, it's like, what do you do if you're the Jets? Do you hope that you can hit a diamond like Bo Nix? Or, do you just, to me, a team like this would be interesting if you had like a Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, and the Jets, once again, we're talking about this like as every year, but they're losing not only their quarterback, there's a good chance that their receiver that they traded for midseason is also gone because he wants to stay around with this guy. So you potentially
or he's going to Packers.
Yeah,
because and a lot of the heat I'm seeing is Packers because he realizes his legacy is the Packers.
So you lose Devontae Adams. That's like, okay, so quarterback is probably the biggest thing you have to address, unless you like to. They've proven in the past that they go the veteran route. Maybe you bolster the offensive line was terrible. You guys have. You have a lot of guys like. You have Kelvin Banks at the top from Texas, or Will Campbell from LSU. So maybe this is an opportunity to try to bolster what you can at the offensive line position, and then, like I said, I know other teams, going the veteran approach with a quarterback instead of going with a young guy.
Yeah, it's just always hard. I'll talk a little bit if you want to pull up the quarterback free agents. It's just always so hard because, you're at the point where you have a Winston, you have a Flacco, you have these guys. I'll tell you who I think I liked for ball control offense as under the radar, and we kind of talked about this with the Panthers, re-signing Andy Dalton because he is someone that has always been kind of like the baseball Mendoza line. Like he is the cutoff for what is an acceptable starting quarterback. And to me, if I'm the Jets and I bolster all that stuff, I like Andy Dalton. He won with the Panthers and stuff like that. He is someone that if I'm doing a ball control offense, that would have been a quarterback that I'm looking at. What'd you pull up for the free agent quarterback? Sorry, did a little bit more research. Sorry about that, guys. But that is who I'm looking at, is someone that is a free agent out there on the quarterback if I'm going that route, because the Jets just have so many needs. And the problem is they have traded for Rodgers and stuff like that, but luckily they didn't give up all their firsts and stuff like that, but their depth is just lacking. And the other problem is the Jets have missed. You hit on Sauce Gardner, but Beckham, who was the offense tackle at Louisville a few years ago, he was supposed to be the guy. He's like 6'7" and monster. He went to the Ravens, that kicked him inside. Boom, there you go. Thank you for the like. It's one of those things that has always been one of the shocking things with the Jets is they are not adaptable. So, and I think it's Beachum actually, sorry, that they kicked inside. And he was just a mauler last year for the Ravens. But that is the issue, is they have like one hit All right, what do you got?
Internet's not working, but I mean, just talk about the Jets. It's just interesting having this conversation every season. I feel bad for the fans because it's just like, it's just every year. It's just it can never seem to fully put it together. Because I also look at like the defensive side of the ball. I mean, you have Quinn and Williams. You got Sauce over there. I know taking a step back, but you have.
He's still an all-pro.
Yeah, but you have good talent on the defensive side of the ball, and it always seems like the offense is always the problem for the Jets, and they just can't ever seem to figure it out.
I mean, last year, like, I forget exactly why I saw with their quarterbacks, but I mean, it was just atrocious stats. And it's like Garrett Wilson, how he hit 1,000 is amazing.
Right.
Like, and it's just one of those things. It's just like, I just need a quarterback back there. But as Aaron Rodgers showed, their O-line, I personally would bump that up a little bit more because with their defense and stuff. But that's my take on that. We want to talk more on the Jets or move on to the Panthers? All right, we are going on to the Panthers. I think this is a make or break year for Young. You're going into year 3. They benched him last year. I will tell you, as a fantasy football person, and most of the people that follow this channel, we are mainly fantasy. I loved Andy Dalton because he made it where Deontay Johnson was viable. Mm-hmm. He made their team, but at the end of the season, Bryce Young was there. I will tell you, I lost 2 championships because I played Kyler Murray, who I was on the fence about because of his rushing upside, but I did pick up Young, and I was like, ooh, do I really want to gamble on a championship game? I was smart enough to pick him up, but I did not start Young, and he looked fabulous at the end of the season.
Yeah, Bryce Young is a guy. I think Panthers fans, I know last year was not the year that you wanted it to be, as it has been in a while. But I think looking at Bryce Young, the way that he played, and we talked about this previous about, bringing Andy Dalton back, he brings a certain leadership and experience that I think he's been a very helpful mentor to Bryce Young and teaching him. And Bryce Young has learned a lot from getting benched and coming back. I think it's certainly promising in that regard. So I'm trying to think, the defense has probably got to be the big thing they have.
Yeah, that's their biggest thing was defense. I mean, they're just, again, seeing quarterback, no way in hell they drafted a quarterback because of the way they did it. I mean, if they do, they're going to draft a 5th, 6th, 7th, they're not drafting a quarterback. It's just one of those things where, to me, it's wide receiver. To see that number 3, wide receiver is so important. Like when teams just don't. And here's the thing about it that's kind of shocking. Last year, whenever they drafted Jonathan Brooks, it's kind of like, why? When teams do that, it's like, why? You had Chuba Hubbard. You spent a 2nd-round pick where you should have spent that on a wide receiver. So here we are again with them needing a wide receiver. And for those of us that are watching that are fantasy people, Chuba Hubbard is so undervalued. Brooks off of a 2nd ACL, I'm not worried about him. So depending on where Hubbard goes, but I almost guarantee you again, he's going to be like 5th round or later. I am going to buy tons of stock on Hubbard. But for the sake of this conversation about the draft, wide receiver is who I'm focusing in on. And at number 8, you should be able to get one of the top guys. And it's the guy that we talked about earlier from Arizona, because there is only so many teams. I mean, you have neighbors at the Giants, so they don't need to. I mean, That would be smart of them if they're punting, if they had neighbors and, just like you're setting them up. But it's one of those things where, to me, that's almost where I'm focusing with them. If it's not defense, I'm doing everything I can to set Young up. And here's why I do that also. So if he is the guy.
Yeah, and we were talking about this draft. The wide receiver room is very, very heavy. I mean, you got Tario McMillan, you have Luther Burden, you have Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State.
Oh, yeah, we haven't even talked about him.
I think,
and people said that he is better than some of the other Ohio State guys that were drafted.
And he was a guy. He's a unique story because he's one of the rare in this NIL era. He was a very rare guy that stuck it out, and he stayed with his team and stayed true. I mean, and I think he's a guy that's certainly undervalued. You have a couple Texas receivers. I mean, Isaiah Bond is up there. You have Matthew Golden. You have Trey Harris from Ole Miss. You have Alec Ayomanor, who I think is also a very underrated receiver from Stanford, just purely because he's from Stanford. I mean, it's not a team that you focus on, but there are plenty of guys that I think you could insert to give Bryce Young the weapons. You obviously have the running back room solved, I think. So giving him some weapons
running back
outside.
If they drafted running back, if I'm a Panthers fan, I'm pitchforks.
Yeah, right.
Like another running back.
So wide receiver's got to be. I think wide receiver's got to be the heavy push here. Even at the 8th pick, you got a lot of top tier talent that you.
100%. I think the one thing that we have not touched about with the Panthers, was interesting. We're kind of going on, and I like the Panthers, and stuff like that. Where they're going is their owner. He needs to just let it simmer, like leave it alone, let it simmer, let it play out and see what happens. But again, if I'm them, I'm 100% focusing on how do I see if Young is the guy. Even if your defense sucks like it did last year, but your offense and you find out you have the quarterback, that's the most important thing in the NFL. Do I have the quarterback?
Yep.
The Cowboys have the cornerback. We'll talk about the Cowboys here in a moment. All right, guys. We are moving on to the New Orleans Saints, and it's interesting they don't have quarterback. I mean, I get it. You have Derek Carr, who you threw money at, but I mean, I would have put quarterback on there. And they have a wide receiver at number 2 because, unfortunately, I will talk about this. Olave, those concussions, especially the one he had this year, that didn't look like a normal. I mean, that was like your brain got smashed into the ground concussion.
Yeah, and quarterback, and even beyond. I mean, backup. I mean, you have like Taysom Hill. I think because of
is he really the backup? Didn't he miss some with a concussion too?
Whatever position he fills in, but losing him, I think the Saints are going to take the approach. And once again, so now you have Kellen Moore. So another team that has another new coach in the position, but I think Kellen Moore will be good for Spencer Rattler, who I think, once again, outside the fact that he's an OU guy.
Homer.
But, went to South Carolina, but played very well under Shane Beamer. I think he showed a little promise, but, throwing him into a situation he probably wasn't quite ready for. But once again, I mean, if you can give him some weapons to work with, I know Olave is, once again, like the Ohio State.
It's his brain.
Yeah. It's, so I think if you can give Spencer Rattler the tools that he needs to succeed.
So here's what I'll say, and I completely agree. I mean, with Carr, I think he's there. But Spencer Rattler, what you hit on, from what I saw on tape, I don't reach for a quarterback. I see if I have anything. Because obviously with the first round of quarterbacks, and we're kind of questioning. So Rattler, see what you're at, man. See what you have before, you reach for someone and stuff like that. And then you wait for next year. Because obviously, if it's not Carr, which we know what Carr is now, it's not Rattler. If he doesn't develop, then you're going to end up with a top pick. Because again, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything. Kamara, I'm kind of actually shocked to not see wide receiver on this. Kamara's like 40, and he does wear down at the end of every season. I always like talking fantasy football with this. Kamara, again, did what he did the last 2 or 3 years. Boom! Amazing. I stole Kamara in the 8th round. He is amazing. I won 5 or 6 games because of Kamara. At the end of the season, Kamara cost you championships. I know they like the guy from TCU. My wife actually had me keep a couple of his cards.
Kendre Miller? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
But Kendre Miller, it sounds like they are out on him. We will see. Obviously, next year, if they don't cut him, it is it for him. I mean, 3rd year and just injuries and stuff like that. But it's one of those things where with this, I think Rattler, you see it's Olave. I think you see what you have. And luckily, with it being the first year, unlike when we talked about the Giants and being at the end, you do have time. You do not have to press and get a quarterback. You see what you have. And hopefully, and honestly, actually, they fired the one guy that was a defensive guy. They fired him pretty quickly. But for the most part, the Saints have shown patience. And because of that, I think that's a good thing for Kellen Moore. And from everything I've ever heard, from the times I've lived in Texas and stuff like that, Kellen Moore is someone that people have always thought has been a genius because he doesn't have the talent, but he's like that guy that'll draw up crazy plays and stuff like that. You've been a Cowboys fan. I'm sure you've heard. That's what I've heard.
Yeah, and it's interesting thinking of the whole staff, too. So now, as of recently, the defense now has Brandon Staley as their new defensive coordinator, who I think in his own right is also a smart guy in that realm. It's interesting.
Another former NFL coach.
Yeah,
I mean, you love teams that bring in tons of head coaches to be their coordinators.
And they work together as well in Los Angeles, so they have a rapport. But it's interesting you brought up running backs. I know Alvin Kamara. I know for fantasy he used to be kind of the guy, but it's kind of wishy-washy. And I think that's kind of a position I think in this draft that's kind of
so deep.
It is, but it's overshadowed by the wide receivers and the quarterback, and it is deep.
We're talking about you have a Gentry. I mean,
So that's where I was going to go. I was like, it's like, and I think some people think that taking a running back this high is a problem, but I also remember that conversation people had a couple years ago with Jahmyr Gibbs, and look what that got them this year. So I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs, I mean, is an example of taking a running back that high, even though.
So I do love Gibbs. You are 100% right. Gibbs is just fantastic. He is lightning. The problem you heard, is something happens to him, like Dave Montgomery. But I agree. Here's the thing: if you take Boise State's running back, you have to do what the Cowboys did not do. And I have to I'm the resident Cowboys hater on DGO, if you're a first-time listener. You have to do what they didn't do with Zeke. You do the 5 years. You hold the line. You pay one franchise tag, maybe two, and you cut them.
Yep.
That's what you do with the first-round running back. You get 7 years most, and you cut them. If they go to the Eagles and they show they still have something, cool. I'm not going to be the one holding the bag when they turn into a pumpkin, because Zeke did that, and Zeke sorry, I apologize. There you go. And Zeke showed that he is the poster child for why you do not pay running backs.
Yeah, and the running back market it's interesting because it took a dip in the last couple of years, and there was a lot of conversation around why is it not garnering what it used to, and they're workhorses and they get hurt more. But then it's kind of made a resurgence. You got guys like
Derek, because of two deep sea states.
Yeah, and you got guys like Derrick Henry who have proven it's like, okay, maybe paying a tout running back is worth it. So I know that's obviously not on the list of kind of like their biggest needs, but I think that is something that the Saints might want to address this offseason.
So I have to give a shout out. If you watch at the end of the Super last year, we did a recap of everything what we thought would be. If you watch Lucas, that is part of the DGL team, he said that running back is about to have a nice little 3 to 5 year resurgence because of the Chiefs and the white defenses have had to adapt because they are the champs and they have to play that two deep safety. So because of that, that softens it up. Go back, watch the shorts. We are the channel that called it. We said that running backs will have a little bit of a resurgence. And I want to call it Lucas, say thank you, Lucas, for calling that, because that is what helped with Derrick Henry. And here's an interesting fact that I love every single time I see it. Derrick Henry, Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley was a monster. He's younger than Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
Like, that just shows you. That is why when we're talking about running back, I got to bring it up. Derrick Henry, Todd Gurley's younger.
That's crazy.
Exactly. What do you say?
No.
Todd Gurley is younger.
That's crazy. And I will say, I guess, just for the Saints, as bringing in as much as the head coach, this will be a big opportunity for Kellen. And he put on, as much as a Cowboys fan, it hurt to see this, but I mean, he put on an absolute clinic in New Orleans, watching him cook the Chiefs for the better part of 4 quarters. I mean, according to Mike McCarthy, who you guys tried so hard to re-sign, you guys didn't need the top offense. Why do we need the top offense when you let him go? This will be a big test for Kellen, and whatever I think he'll bring a unique approach. I believe it was Dennis Allen was before, and that wasn't quite the guy that they needed. So whatever, I think Kellen will bring a fresh mindset and whatever, wherever they want to go with the future of this team.
All right, moving on to the Bears. Exactly, the Bears. I mean, bam, right there, Caleb Williams. Look what the top 3 are: guard, center, tackle.
And this was as an OU guy, trying to put that aside with Caleb transferring and coming from USC and watching him come out of college. You saw all of the highlights that came with him, but there was a big question for me. I was like, can Caleb do the little things? Yes, he can scramble outside the pocket for 50 yards and make a miraculous play, but can he do the little things? And when you don't have a strong offensive line that you need, you don't give him the opportunity to showcase that he can run the simple, that he can run the screens, that he can run the RPOs, that he can run so you really need to give him a chance, because there were so many games watching him play this year where he was running for his life.
I mean, that's what happens with Fields. That is where I'll say this, and if you go back and check the receipts, I did not like Caleb Williams, number one, and it's because he doesn't have that killer instinct. If you watched him at USC, he was not the guy that when your team was behind, he's yelling and screaming, trying to fire them up. He is the guy who sat there and pouted. And because of that, I was not the biggest fan of him, honestly. And I mean, he does have the arm talent. He showed it. And I will say that. But when you have that, what I'm saying, him not having that killer instinct means you do need to build even more around him, because when he falls behind, he pouts. There was a game where he was way ahead of the Packers, and I was like, fuck, and I watched that game. Packers started coming back. Started coming back. He started falling apart. So because of that, when he's just a talent guy, you need to give him all the bubble wrap you can, which is the guard, the center, and the tackle, which is nuts that you say you need all three positions. Usually you just need one. I mean, all three positions?
And Ben Johnson knows this, which it's interesting looking through this top 10. A lot of these teams that are going to be starting fresh with a new coach,
O-line,
new mindset, and Ben Johnson knows that because the offensive line that the Lions had last year. I mean, they were.
Oh yeah.
You got guys like Penei Sewell out there. I mean,
yes,
he knows what it takes.
Ragnar at center,
and you already have guys in the young receiver might be nice, but he's got guys to throw the ball to, and he's got DeAndre Swift, for better or for worse. He kind of screwed me in my fantasy this last year, but. I mean, maybe, but I think, he knows that he's got to give Caleb time. And I don't know. We'll see. I think he brings a fresh mindset.
Well, it's kind of shocking that they have that. I mean, you honestly, have Cole Kmet. Yeah. You have Odunze. You have more. Even if we take Allen off, you have three pass catchers. Like who am I hating on? I'm hating on NFL.com. Come on. Wide receiver at number 3. Like, no way when you have three pass catchers like that do you draft another. Like, especially with that team needing, like, it. Anyways, it's just ridiculous.
But yeah, no, offensive line has to be the focus for the Bears here. In order to you got to give Caleb time to be able to process things, and I think, like I said, Ben Johnson will give him kind of a new perspective. But if you can give him the line and the protection that he needs, I think you might be able to see his stock go up. And I think,
and you can have the first 4,000 passer in Bears history.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely.
The only team not to have that. All right, guys. We will jump in because we are less than an hour. We will jump into the Cowboys and Packers. Got to scroll down, find them. And this is where I will talk a little shit. The guy next to me, the reason why we are doing Cowboys and Packers, because he is a Cowboys fan. And I am a
Cowboys got the 12th overall pick.
Oh, crap. I scrolled way too far. Oh, man. Well, I was like way down there.
It is a good starting point because...
No. Hold on. I got to cut him off. This is my opinion on the Cowboys. Why'd you win some games? Why? When you knew Dak was out, why did you guys not solidify a top 10 pick? Answer that question and then go.
I can't. Yeah, I can't give an answer to that. It was this year. I mean, Dak is a whole conversation about, there's no reason why he should be the highest paid quarterback. Honestly, I just... And in such an era, even beyond the Cowboys, the fact that there are 10 quarterbacks, albeit what happened in the last Super Bowl, the fact that there are 10 quarterbacks in the league that make more money than Patrick Mahomes is shocking.
Patrick is taking the approach of Tom Brady.
Yep.
Tom Brady was about legacy and getting those rings. And here's what I'll tell you. We'll get to the Packers here in a second. Me being the Packers guy. There is no greater, the Packers, what happened? We had Favre and Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers every time wanted every single penny, and that cost us championships. He went to 5 other championships, didn't get to the Super Bowl after the one he won. And when you look at it, it is those margins. If you leave $3, $4, $5 million, those are the margins that make the difference. And that's where I take my hat off to Patrick Mahomes, because Patrick Mahomes understands legacy, and that will pay you in the future. Cool. Rodgers got his money now. What happens when Rodgers retires? Nothing. Exactly. Yeah. He's gone.
Yep.
Where Brady, Mahomes, they will still be relevant. They will be up there with the all-time greats because they have those Super Bowls. And that's where me as a Packers fan, there's no greater injustice as far as a fan than going from Favre to Rodgers and going into 2 Super Bowls.
But looking at the Cowboys, the only route to go here the only route to me that makes sense.
That's stupid running back.
No, you have to take Ashton Genty.
What?
You have to. Watching Ashton Genty carry a Mountain West team.
He retired, but yes, keep Ashton Genty
to the first 12-team playoff. The man that can, the kid is from Frisco, balled out at Boise State, took them to the playoffs. I would rather take the approach in the offseason, especially the offensive line. Now that Zach Martin is retired, Tyler Guyton has not. Tyler Guyton actually has a similar career path to Tyler Smith because you threw Tyler Smith in there, and that first
Tyler Smith did well his first year at tackle.
He struggled.
No. He graded out as above average where Guyton did not.
Well, he did.
I will call out the homerism on the on the Cowboys.
But he did. But the standard of the Dallas Cowboys offensive line is set so high that if you don't reach a certain pedigree, you have guys like Zach Martin, you have Tyrone Smith. But he has worked out. But I think I would rather.
But that's only because you had Smith, you had Frederick, and you had retired Martin. It has dropped and dropped and dropped to the point where I put the Cowboys almost like the Bears, where I'm putting center, tackle, everything else, because that is where the Cowboys fall apart. If you look at Dak Prescott, when he did the best, he had the most solid O-line in front of him.
But when he doesn't have, he needs Dak. I need assurance in the running back room. Like Rico Dowdle was great, but I don't want to. But
you don't pay Dowdle.
But that's the thing. You also look at it from a monetary perspective. I mean, you can get Ashton Genty on a rookie contract instead of paying Dowdle whatever he is due. And yes, I was okay with us getting Zeke back purely for the amount that we paid him for. I didn't want him, but now seeing I'm like, it didn't pan out. Let's move on. I think Ashton Genty is the way to go. And these other position groups, I would rather tackle in free agency with veteran guys, particularly on the offensive line, and take Genty, because then you can give him a solid a line to run behind. And you give Dak relief, because Dak struggles when the run game is abysmal and you have to rely on him to pass the ball.
Yeah, after his ankle injury, because the thing is they did a lot of rollouts and stuff, but he's become kind of a statue back there. Yeah. So when you have that at quarterback, you have to build the O-line, which is why I said I would put like the Bears where I have O-line, center, and tackle. I do think that you guys did hit decent on center with the guy from Kansas State that you moved over.
Cooper Beebe. I remember watching. He was kind
of
like
the fact that he fell not Frederick, but the guy that replaced Frederick, Biotish.
Yeah, Tyler Biotish.
He's like Biotish, where he could be a Pro Bowler.
And Cooper. I remember watching Cooper Beebe because before Oklahoma went to the SEC, playing against Kansas State and seeing Cooper Beebe operate. I mean, he is fit in well, and like I said, losing Zach Martin is a whole, but then at the same time, it's almost the same situation as Tyrone Smith because of the injuries, and you lose him for part of the season. It's like you're losing a veteran guy, but age becomes a factor, and so it's time to fill in with the other guys.
I mean, to me, part of the hard question is Smith, the guard, and I almost have a hard conversation. This is probably the Cowboys never have hard conversations. I go, cool. You are an all-pro guard. We kick you out to tackle. You can be a Pro Bowler. The money.
Yep.
Tyler Smith.
Yep.
I almost go, Tyler Smith, how about we kick you out there? Think of the money, because Tyler Smith has shown he can handle left tackle, and it's so much easier to replace guards than it is to replace tackles, and that's what I do. And maybe Guyton does better. Maybe he and it might even be a 1-year thing. Maybe you flip-flop next year.
Yep.
But if he has that little bit of bubble at guard where he's between BB, who's shown he can handle a position, you're between the other Smith who can handle it, then it just gives him that confidence because he does have the length and stuff that's better. But that's where I am with the Cowboys. I think it's O-line, O-line, O-line.
Yeah, and the Cowboys, it's rough being a Cowboys fan. And, we will, it's a longer conversation, but with the current ownership group,
you guys see me flicking this bean.
Linebacker, we can address in the second round, and I have a guy that
No. Who am I really talking about?
Yeah, who are you talking about?
Like a person.
Oh yeah.
What are you guys doing? You paying them the top dollar? Because then you got CD, you have Dak.
I think you have to pay him, but I think you can if you can work it out where you can restructure Dak's contract to free up a little bit of money, and then there's a few other free agents that I think that you can cut that'll save you some money. And Micah has come out and said that he is willing to take less money to stay in the position. And if he's true to his word on that, I think you can make it work in the grand scheme of things, given you can restructure Dak's contract. That will free up, I think, enough money to make it work.
I would agree. And what you said is Dak. Dak is the key because the Cowboys don't like. The Cowboys learned with Romo when they were pushing things out to the future and it bit them in the ass with Dak's rookie contract. So it's one of those things where I think that they are scared to push money out, unlike every other team. But it's just like one of those things because if they have to try Micah Parsons, I mean, and I've heard this a little bit, man, Parsons would look good on the Eagles because that is his hometown team.
Or the other one, I was like the Lions. I'm like, if you want to solidify that edge rusher,
him and Aiden.
Oh
my, yes.
Aiden will be coming off of a broken leg, but I mean, even still, I mean, if you get those guys, I mean that's a nightmare for the NFC.
Exactly.
For the whole league.
And me as a Packers fan, I have a really good friend, Kyle, that I talk about all the time. I support him as a Lions fan because unlike the Cowboys who just hate all things in their division, I feel like the NFC North, we support each other because we're like the underdog division. I told Kyle, I was like, man, this year sucked because of the fact that you guys got that number 1 seed, but it took your body getting the shit beat out of you to get that number 1 seed. So when you got that first round bye, your defense was done, man. You had nothing left, which now we will go down to a real team. Yeah. Look how far I got to go, man. Look how far I got to go to get to the Packers. Look at this every year to get to my Packers. My goodness, we're good. Denver, we're below Denver. We're below. What do you guys say? Wait. I mean, we'll get my Packers. Look at it. There we go. Sorry, it took me forever. Cornerback, I will say this. So Jair, when healthy, is a top 5 cornerback. I told those people that watched us, especially the ones that are watching at the end when we're talking about bets and stuff like that, when we are playing the Vikings. I've said this, and you made money off of me this year. If Jair played against the Vikings, you fade Justin Jefferson. Why? Because Jair hits with that gritty.
Yep.
He knows how, and he is a top 5 cornerback, but without Jair. And so for that reason, I think you let him play this year. I'm personally not sacrificing Jair because I think between him and Nix and Stokes, we can roll. I would rather be number 2 at edge rusher, which Alcohol's kind of the guy from Michigan. That's a pretty good edge rusher that we have, but he's on and off. That's where I'm focusing is on edge rusher. And I see my boy over here doing some research. What do you got?
You got Rashawn Gary over here.
Gary, there we go.
But just the Packers, I mean, as a whole, I mean,
we're great.
Josh Jacobs was my savior this year in fantasy football. Watching that guy put up points for me, averaging like 20 points a game. I mean, the offense is spoken for. I mean, you guys you have everything you need. Jordan Love is a guy.
Well, I do think maybe at number 1, talk of bringing in Devontae, and maybe it's just to take pressure off of, say, Reed, because I loved Reed's rookie year.
That's been the killer this year was the injuries between Christian Watson and Jaden Reed. I mean, injuries were just detrimental.
Dubs is on his 4th year. This is last year.
Just to the wide receiver core, but I mean, if there were any doubts, Jordan Love is your guy. You have a tout offensive line. I mean, you got a lot of key pieces on your defense. But yes, Jair Alexander, you're right. When he's healthy, he is a top 5 guy. But
from a Cowboys fan,
from a Cow. But Jair, but yeah. So I think you have to look at potentially finding some padding there to help you in that spot. I think that's kind of where you need to address this offseason, particularly in this draft.
So you see center here and stuff like that. I will say, as an actual Packers fan, someone that watches it, I would maybe bolster our O line a little bit more because Jordan Love, and this is one of the things that I saw, and it's one of the things that I didn't realize, so I saw it. Love has a lot more Brett Favre in him than Aaron Rodgers. And it wasn't until I watched Love that it made me respect Rodgers a little bit more. I know Rodgers is a douchebag. It is true.
Heard it here first. You heard it here first, folks. Yeah, there we go.
But there's something about a guy who only throws 600 interceptions.
Yeah.
Love has a lot of Aaron Rodgers. He's that gunslinger. He thinks he can throw it into everything. And that kind of hurt the Packers a little bit. So to help him with that, you help with the O-line. You give him that time to make sure he can see the proper reads and things like that. Because as a Brett Favre person that liked him and I loved him, I cannot tell you how many times I saw him kill the Packers, specifically in the playoffs, when he would throw a back-breaking interception. And because Love has proven he has more Favre than Rodgers, you need to give him as much protection.
I will say the Packers is, if you want a master class on a veteran, drafting a rookie, and developing a quarterback, the Packers have had a level of consistency at quarterback that I don't know that any other team truly has. Because you go from Favre, and you get this guy Aaron Rodgers that comes in and brings you a Super Bowl, and then you got a guy in that draft 32nd overall, and you draft Jordan Love, and the fans don't understand why. And then
I hated it.
Yeah, you had Aaron Rodgers, and you're like, why are we spending the 32nd pick on a quarterback from Utah State? What are we doing? And you get this guy, and then Aaron Rodgers' time in Green Bay ends, and then you have a guy that
a Hall of Famer who's probably better than Favre.
Yeah, honestly, and then now you have a guy in Jordan Love that is proven that he can be a starter. If you want a developmental masterclass at the quarterback position, it is the Green Bay Packers.
And this is what I'll say. I tell people this all the time because when I look at Love, I don't know if he's an All-Pro. I don't know if he's a Hall of Famer, but he's a Pro Bowler.
Yep.
To go from 2 Hall of Famers even to a Pro Bowler and sit next to a guy that is a Cowboys fan, and when you do this, all you gotta do is look at the Cowboys. And I am a Cowboys hater, but is one of those things where after Troy Aikman, holy crap, before Tony Romo, I mean, you guys were just wandering. That proves just how important a quarterback is. Because you had Tony Banks, you had, and this is where I always say some people hate on Bill Parcells. Bill Parcells won with the Q.
Yeah, and Bill Parcells, yeah, and
he won a playoff, he made it to the playoffs with. I said the Q because that's what Joey Gow. The guy here, what was his name? Georgia.
It was between, I don't know, man. That was
okay.
That was before I was.
I know he's a baby. Anyways, but yes, Parcells reestablished the Cowboys, and he helped set the foundation. But Romo, he is proof why quarterbacks are so important. And so, if you go from 2 Hall of Famers even to a Pro Bowler, that is amazing.
And not to bring it too much back to the Cowboys, but it is
Quincy Carter.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go, Quincy Carter.
Yeah, it compared to the Packers, who have, especially the playoff game last year, who, were underdogs coming into Dallas the year prior. I mean,
we should have beat the 49ers.
Especially looking at after this year, I'm like, you look at, if you have to take a long, hard look in the mirror if you're Jerry Jones, which I wouldn't want to look in the mirror that long. I wouldn't want to look at him. But you go in a year where inside of your own division, the NFC Championship game is comprised of the Eagles
and the Reds
and the Commanders. Who have been irrelevant for as long as I've been alive. And 1 year with Dan Quinn are all the way there with a rookie quarterback.
And you let him go.
Yep.
Let him go.
And that's not where we wanted to go. But
and what he is saying the year before, that was because this guy was healthy. So, as I'd say, I would let him play out this year. I'm not cutting him. I think we're fine. I would actually move on to edge move on to the defense. If we get Adams, I think Adams still can be, like that. He kind of reminds me of this before your time, but McCaffrey, Chris Carter at the end. At this point, what Adams is, he is that guy that he might have 100 receptions for 1,000 yards. He is Jarvis Landry.
Oh,
He's just
yeah,
that possession guy. He hits that quick slant whenever you need those hands, man. He's gonna pull it down, and that's what he is at this part. He is no longer that deep threat. He's not gonna bust it open, but that helps take the pressure off. So when Love's in there looking, he goes, "All right, I need 8 yards," and this is where it goes. He looks at Adams, then he looks at Reed, and what happens? Reed is open now because Adams is covered.
Yep.
Because they have the linebacker and the safety or someone over the top, so it's one-on-one, and it's shifty guy like Reed. Boom. Anyways, all right, we are going to end the session. Thank you guys so much. We had probably 30 to 50 people that popped in and out. Appreciate it so much. Thank you guys so much. Him and I are going to be going through the top 10 doing breakdowns over the next few weeks and stuff like that. So thank you so much for all of you guys, and we will talk to you guys later.